Hi, I'm Kian Lee, an assistant professor of Underwood International College, Yonsei University. We are in the era of pandemic that led us to experience various difficulties on top of the challenges that we had before, for example, climate change. Fortunately, we're also in the era of AI, which may be the one of powerful tools that we have today. So this year, in the Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum, we consider that AI can be fully utilized in the engagement and empowerment of sustainable development so that we have this feature session, AI for Engagement and Empowerment. Intergovernmental organizations, governments, industry, and academia are all engaging in different AI applications for sustainable development. However, we must avoid fragmented efforts and recognize the need to empower one another. This feature session will offer a platform to discuss current activities and possible directions for mutually empowering partnerships among different stakeholders to deploy AI solutions that can accelerate the achievement of sustainable development goals. Dear participants, it is my great honor to welcome David Rolnick, Priya Danti from academia, Jung Ha from industry, and Chasab Lee from international organization. Dr. David Rolnick is an assistant professor of computer science department in McGill University. Priya Danti is a researcher in Carnegie Mellon University, and they are the chairs of Climate Change AI. Dr. Jung Ha is the head of Naver AI, the leading IT company in Korea. Dr. Jasip Lee is the director of ITU Telecommunications Standardization Bureau, who is also leading AI for Good. Generally, we meet in Yonsei University in Seoul, South Korea. Nevertheless, I'm very pleased that we're able to have this virtual session with you. I would like to talk about questions relating to how we should build a sustainable world with AI, artificial intelligence. Let me start with several questions for our panelists. Please share your current activities and share your opinions regarding these questions. First, what kind of efforts are being made by industry, academia, governments, and international organizations in the field of AI for engagement and empowerment? Second, what kind of difficulties do industry, academia, governments, and international organizations experience in the field of AI for engagement and empowerment? In your opinion, what are some of the most important issues we should address? Third, in your opinion, what kind of cooperation is necessary among industry, academia, governments, and international organizations in the field of AI for engagement and empowerment? So, for these three questions, let me ask these three questions first to David and Priya. David, Priya?
Hello, my name is Priya Donti, and I'm a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University and a U.S. Department of Energy Computational Science Graduate Fellow.
And I'm David Rolnick. I'm an assistant professor of computer science and Canada CFAR AI chair at McGill University and the Mila Quebec AI Institute, and scientific co-director of sustainability in the digital age.
And together with our colleague, Dr. Lynn Koch of ETH Zurich, we are the chairs of Climate Change AI. Climate change is one of the most urgent issues of our time, with widespread impacts across society, particularly for the world's most disadvantaged populations. In order to avoid some of the worst impacts of climate change, we will need to aggressively reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050, and also take action to adapt to the effects of a changing climate. While there's no silver bullet, AI and other advanced technologies can play an important role. The term artificial intelligence, or AI, refers to any algorithm that allows a computer to perform a complex task, for instance, those often associated with human intelligence. Recently, there have been many advances in a subfield of AI called machine learning, which refers to any AI technique that can extract patterns from data, usually large amounts of data. AI and machine learning tools have many strengths that can be leveraged in climate change and other domains. These include the ability to perform simple tasks such as labeling images at a large scale, the ability to dynamically optimize complex systems, and the ability to derive decision-relevant insights from large streams of raw data. At the same time, AI and machine learning have many limitations that may make them unsuitable for certain tasks. Machine learning algorithms in particular are very reliant on the quality of their data, often summarized via the phrase garbage in, garbage out, and can inherit the assumptions and biases associated with their data, their designers, and the social and technical systems in which they're used. Machine learning algorithms also assume that the patterns in their data are persistent. This means, for example, that a machine learning algorithm trained to predict electricity demand before the COVID-19 pandemic would likely not do a good job at predicting demand during the pandemic. With all that said, there are indeed many different ways in which AI and machine learning can play a part in climate action. In fact, about a year and a half ago, we and a team of other experts across academia and industry wrote a paper detailing hundreds of applications of AI to climate change across areas such as energy, industry, land use, and disaster response. While I'd encourage those who are interested to read the full paper or to browse the associated interactive summaries online, I'll give a brief overview of some of the main themes outlined in the paper. As large amounts of unstructured data become available, such as satellite imagery or large corpuses of text documents, AI can help gather decision-relevant insights from this data, for instance, by tracking greenhouse gas emissions in real time, pinpointing deforestation as it happens, or gathering infrastructure data such as the locations of buildings from satellite imagery. To highlight one example in slightly more detail, climate change will unfortunately have large impacts on agriculture due to an increase in storms, droughts, floods, and pests. There is therefore a need to monitor crop yields at scale in order to inform farming practices. AI has been used to automatically label crops over a wide area by analyzing patterns in satellite and aerial imagery. Another overall theme is forecasting, or understanding what's going to happen next, which has applications in areas such as predicting renewable energy supply to aid power system optimization, predicting transportation demand for public transit planning, or predicting extreme events to inform disaster response efforts. For instance, diving into the example of very short-term renewable energy forecasting, or nowcasting, AI techniques in the area of time series analysis have been used extensively in this area. In particular, AI algorithms are able to infer patterns in data such as historical weather in order to predict solar power production. Some methods have even used AI to track the movement of clouds in video and image data in order to better understand the amount of solar radiation that will fall upon a particular solar panel, and therefore how much power that panel will produce. A third theme is improving operational efficiency, that is, reducing waste in the operation of real-world systems by optimizing them more effectively. This theme occurs in many different contexts, including the optimization of freight transportation systems, optimizing heating and cooling systems in buildings. For instance, heating, ventilation, and cooling systems, or HVAC systems, account for over half of building energy use, and there is a lot of scope to make them more energy efficient. for instance, by accounting for building thermodynamics, building usage patterns, and equipment constraints. AI techniques from areas such as reinforcement learning can help by learning efficient operational methods for controlling HVAC systems in residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. A fourth theme is predictive maintenance, or understanding failures as or before they occur. This can be useful, for example, in preventing natural gas leaks in industrial settings, or building more climate-resilient infrastructure. One example in this area is the maintenance of rail systems. Railway systems are critical to decarbonizing transportation systems, and predictive maintenance can help increase the competitiveness of these systems, for instance, by making them more efficient and on time. Entities such as Deutsche Bahn in Germany have used AI to analyze large amounts of sensor data at scale in order to then detect anomalies that could be occurring in the future. The next theme I'd like to highlight is that AI can help accelerate the process of scientific experimentation itself. For instance, in the development of new materials like perovskites for photovoltaics, new electrofuel materials, or conducting solids for batteries. For instance, there is a great amount of research and development needed to improve the performance and cost of battery electric storage systems for both electricity and transportation. While AI can't replace the process of scientific experimentation, it can be used to analyze patterns in past experiments in order to understand which next experiments are likely to be more successful. That is, to intelligently recommend which materials it might be good to try next. The last theme I'd like to highlight is that AI can be used to approximate time-intensive physical simulations. So for example, climate models, energy models, or various models associated with city planning. In many of these cases, there is a very time-intensive model that would take a lot of time or compute or energy to run. And AI can actually help speed up or slim down these models. Focusing in on a specific example, we can look at climate models, where there's a need to downscale them, or in other words, to make their predictions more localized. This can enable decision-making by, for instance, city governments. However, such localized predictions are often not possible since climate models are so time-intensive to run. AI can help enableize localized simulations by creating fast approximations to particularly time-intensive parts of these models.
Now that we've outlined some of the ways that AI can be helpful within many climate change strategies, we'd like to frame that with some context and caveats. First, many important strategies for climate action don't benefit from AI at all. Smart buildings are good, but making sure buildings are well insulated may be an easier and more impactful first step. Even where AI is applicable, it's only one part of the strategy. It's a tool that can accelerate and enable other work. It's also worth remembering that sometimes the flashy applications of AI that get lots of press, like self-driving cars, may not be as impactful for the climate as more mundane applications like freight routing. Finally, AI is a technological tool. It's not intrinsically either good or bad, and it can be used for applications that make climate change worse too. Notably, AI is being used extensively to accelerate oil and gas exploration and extraction, which is slowing down the transition to low-carbon energy sources. In deploying AI in the context of climate change, there are several considerations that it's important to bear in mind. First, while there are many powerful and complex AI methods, it's generally good to start with as simple a method as possible, because sometimes the more complicated methods aren't necessary. Second, making something more efficient doesn't necessarily translate into benefits for the climate because of rebound effects, also called the Jevons paradox. For example, self-driving cars may make climate change worse overall if they make driving easier and cheaper, resulting in more miles being driven. The climate impacts of self-driving cars will depend on how exactly the technology is developed and the policies in place surrounding it. Next, it is important to remember that new technologies can exacerbate inequities in society unless care is taken to ensure that the benefits of the technology, as well as who gets to control and understand it, are widely distributed. Finally, partnerships are key to alleviating all the potential pitfalls we've outlined here. Partnerships that include researchers in AI and climate-relevant fields, industries and other entities implementing the work, the end users and communities that it impacts, policymakers involved in regulating the space, and other affected parties. There are several major bottlenecks that are holding back impactful work in this space. The first is knowledge gaps, both on the side of AI experts and for experts in the climate-relevant areas where AI could be useful. Often, there is a poor understanding of what is or is not impactful, or what AI's capabilities and limitations are. Second, there is a lack of infrastructure. Data availability and data sharing standards are in many cases lacking. Funding for cross-disciplinary work may fall between the cracks in existing funding streams, and policy is also needed to facilitate impactful work from research through deployment. Finally, networking and partnership opportunities are vital between communities that often do not communicate. Experts in AI and climate-relevant domains, members of academia, industry, policy, and civil society. Bringing different stakeholders together is essential for ensuring that projects achieve climate impact and benefits to society. Policy will play a key role in addressing many of these bottlenecks. For instance, there is a huge need to incentivize the use of AI in ways that are beneficial for the climate. These include policy approaches to bring different stakeholders together and incentivize interdisciplinary research, pilots and demonstration programs to advance the technological readiness of AI applications, and, where appropriate, addressing any regulatory hurdles that may exist to deploying AI in relevant sectors and industries. It will also be important to increase the number of entities with AI capabilities to ensure that such capabilities aren't concentrated among a select few companies, as well as to design economic incentives and regulatory requirements to avoid rebound effects in industrial efficiency applications. To ensure that AI is used effectively, it will also be important that public entities themselves develop in-house AI capacity to better facilitate and implement these kinds of strategies, to incorporate a diversity of stakeholders from civil society through the scoping, design, and deployment of AI approaches in order to increase effectiveness and mitigate potential harms, to develop standards and best practices for when and how AI versus other techniques should be used, and to develop standards around data collection, management, and sharing that can facilitate impactful applications and are also mindful of considerations such as privacy. I'd like to conclude with an overview of Climate Change AI, a global organization of volunteers from academia, industry, and policy that catalyzes impactful work at the intersection of climate change and AI. We cultivate a global network of thousands of researchers, policymakers, industry leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, and more. We provide digital resources for those looking to work in this space, from the report that Priya outlined to videos, tutorials, compendia of data, and much more. We provide advice to stakeholders ranging from individuals to national governments, and we run events for networking and knowledge sharing. Some of our recent events include workshops to share research at the world's 3 premier machine learning conferences, side events at the UN Climate Change Conference, COP25, and TEDx Climate Change AI. I encourage anyone in the audience who is interested to check out the Climate Change AI network via our newsletter, which compiles opportunities and news in the space of climate change and AI, and our digital discussion forum, which brings together leaders in this space from around the world. You can find these resources on our website or follow us on social media to hear about upcoming initiatives. As a sneak preview, we will soon be launching with our partners a multi-million-dollar grants program to support research and dataset creation in impactful applications of AI to climate change. Thanks everyone for listening, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Priya. Now I would like to ask the same questions to Dr. Ha. Dr. Ha?
Hello everyone, I'm Jung Ha, the head of Naval AI Lab. I appreciate the GEEF 2021 organizers for inviting me. It is my honor to see the GEEF 2021 audiences and share Naval's efforts for AI engagement and empowerment. I'll describe my opinions briefly. On our efforts, for the past several years, as the AI leading company of Korea, Naval has put in considerable efforts for AI for engagement and empowerment. In particular, Naver pays attention to the growth of members of our society and platform. The first example is supporting small and medium enterprises, SME, and small creators. Naver has been operating the largest e-commerce platform in Korea. The name is Naver Smart Store, and many sellers on our platforms. Naver provides sellers with powerful AI-enhanced tools. For examples, the sellers benefit from intensive analysis results on their business activities, our AI image editing and enhancing tools, and live commerce broadcasting. Recently, a news was reported that the revenue of an SME was increased 10 times with our live commerce broadcasting platform for 2 months. Naver Financial lends SME money based on our own innovative credit evaluation criteria. It also helps the growth of SMEs. Another effort is AI education. Lack of AI talents is a severe problem all over the world, and Korea is no exception. Connect Foundation, Naver's non-commercial foundation, provides software and AI education programs for elementary and secondary education. This effort helps our children to be familiar with living with AI together. For the past 3 years, Naver has held more than 10 times of AI competition with our own data and cloud computing infrastructures to expand the base of AI technology and foster AI talent. We believe in that these efforts lead to sustainable growth of AI and our society. On difficulty, regulations and legal issues are one of the main difficulties. To the extent that it does not violate privacy issue, using diverse user and customer data improves the efficacy of AI tools. As I mentioned, the loan service of Naver Financial can be much more improved by integrating other source data, which might lead to remarkable growth of SMEs. In respect to AI education, infrastructure such as GPUs is a critical issue, which require huge scale costs. Also, legal issues such as intellectual property make the data release difficult, which is important in AI education. On cooperation, to handle regulations, supporting of government is absolutely necessary. For example, AI and data-related regulations need to be revised to be more flexible. The Korean government supports large-scale AI data construction and release project for the past 3 years. The data license should be CC BY or CC BY SA for redistribution and reproduction. Academia and industry can cooperate to make AI education curriculum and contents much more effective and richer. This effort can greatly contribute to overcoming lack of AI talents.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ha. Again, now, what is your opinion, Dr. Lee? Dr. Lee?
Dear colleagues and friends, I thank you very much for the kind invitation today. ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, is the United Nations specialized agency for ICTs. We are a global membership of 193 member states, over 800 private members, and more than 150 universities. No other organization in the world has our unique public-private partnership model. We coordinate the global allocation of radio frequency spectrum and the satellite orbital positions. We develop international standards, providing technical foundations for communication networks. For example, we have received Primetime Emmy Awards in Hollywood thanks to our video compression standards. And we support developing countries around the world in setting up their ICT infrastructure. AI technology will impact every corner of business and society, including to help achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. ITU does a lot of work on AI. We believe that everyone should participate in the conversation to determine how AI will factor into our future. For this reason, ITU offers several platforms on AI which are open to anyone. No membership is required. The AI for Good Global Summit, organized by ITU, is the leading UN platform where conversations take place on how AI can foster the SDGs. The summit is an all-year, always online platform with almost daily programming. We feature startups as well as Nobel Prize laureates. Much of ITU's technical work has been spawned by the AI for Good Global Summit. The technical work takes place in groups that we call focus groups. Focus groups are also open platforms. Again, no membership is required. One of our most exciting work items takes place in the focus group on AI for health, driven by ITU together with the WHO. We are developing a benchmarking process to test the quality of AI for health solutions. We have delivered new ITU standards, providing toolsets to integrate AI and machine learning into 5G. ITU just finished the AI in 5G challenge, a competition where of 1,300 professionals and students from over 60 countries participated to solve real problems in 5G networks. We have a focus group working to monitor and assess the behavioral performance of the AI drivers in control of automated vehicles. We have a focus group studying environmental efficiency in view of the latest advances in frontiers such as AI. So we aim to be green by ICT and green over ICT. This task is growing more significant by the day. And we have a brand new focus group that is so new that we don't yet have a logo. AI for Natural Disaster Management, a group that we are running together with the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, and United Nations Environment Program, UNEP. AI has extraordinary potential to act as a force for good, but there are considerable challenges. First should be bias issue. While AI can be amazingly good, but it can also be amazingly bad. It all depends on the quality and the amount of data that is fed to an AI model. In real life, data is often poorly labeled. Standardization of data sets is needed. Data also often biased. To see bias at work, just enter the word baby into your favorite search engine and then think about the results you get. Training courses on the ethical application of AI are needed, and not just for computer engineering students. Second should be data availability. Getting data is very difficult. Best practices need to be defined with respect to the circumstances under which data can be made available and to whom. Data privacy and security is important. Security breaches due to cyber attacks can have horrific consequences. Federated learning allows the training of an AI model across devices that hold data locally without exchanging that data, and privacy-preserving technologies help ensure personal data protection. Trust explainability also take into account. It is often unclear how deep learning models arrive at their conclusion. There is a debate around whether we would prefer AI to make accurate predictions, which are complex but more accurate, or simple yet explainable ones. Limited know-how is an important issue. AI can tackle many problems, but there is only a limited pool of experts who know how to apply AI. So education is key to learning about the responsible use of AI. Equitable use of AI also take into account AI research is computationally intensive. Unequal access to computing power and data deepens the divide between a few companies and the elite universities which do have resources, and the rest of the world which does not. Finally, artificial general intelligence. There is the hope or fear, depending on your point of view, of what artificial general intelligence would do to humankind. We need to prepare for it now to make sure that AI is used in a benevolent way. All of these challenges require collaboration and cooperation among many stakeholders. ITU offers a unique platform that brings together governments, companies, academia, and non-governmental organizations. Please join the AI for Good movement. We are growing stronger every day, becoming even more inclusive and more scalable towards global impact. I look forward to our continued work together to ensure that AI helps us to care for each other better and build a better future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your participation. According to your opinions, I see 3 or 4 common issues. For example, the need for equitable access and use of AI, the need to develop AI talent, and the need for regulation about data use, and the need for data privacy and security. So let's share more actionable items that academia can do, industry can do, and intergovernmental organizations can do. Also, what do academia and industry and intergovernmental organizations expect from the other stakeholders? I would say maybe Priya and David go first.
So I think one very important step that academia can take is to diversify the set of stakeholders that are brought in for academic and non-academic partnerships. In particular, there is quite a lot of temptation, especially at top technical universities, to bring in only top tech companies, existing entities that have a lot of power and AI implementation capacity. And I think creating an ethos of diversifying that set of stakeholders, working also with smaller stakeholders or stakeholders who would not traditionally leverage AI and other advanced technologies, but ensuring that capability is available to them will be really important, not just in direct collaborations, but also in some sense sending a message to the next generation of researchers and innovators that this is how they should be thinking about stakeholder partnerships. This can happen through existing kinds of partnerships. So anything from bringing which entities academics bring in for talks, who is represented at job or career fairs, where funding streams are coming from, or where funding streams are directed to when there's, for example, research funding that is then funded to create a real world project. Who is that project for? So that's what I think academia itself can do. In terms of other stakeholders, I think that, of course, directing funding streams in a way that encourages this kind of democratized research is going to be really important. And in general, I think that a lot of this will have to happen also outside academia. Governments, I think, will have to create incentives to democratize, for example, the space of AI solutions providers. So it is not just a couple of top technical companies, but also so that there are many, many entities that can provide these services, that there's interoperability between these services to ensure that no entity is locked into the service of one particular solutions provider, that there's the ability to switch. So these are just a few thoughts on what can be done.
And building off of what Priya said, which I completely agree with, I think that there are cultural issues which are underlying some of these weaknesses in the system. Cultural in the sense that the culture of academia, and in particular of AI and tech-related academia, is often one that does not include broader sets of stakeholders naturally, and the expectations of work in academia in this area need to ensure that people recognize that in order to make a difference, AI is not going to come in alone and try and successfully solve society's problems. It's going to be one piece of existing strategies. And it's going to be only in conjunction with people who are studying and deploying those strategies that the impact of AI and other technologies can be felt. And from the policy and governmental side, there needs to be a recognition that AI is really just another tool, a powerful engineering tool, but an engineering tool. And it's not something that only some elite few institutions, organizations, companies have access to, that it is something which can be done in-house in some cases in governments, or through local community and smaller company actors. You don't have to reach out to Google in order to have a good AI algorithm. You can do it yourself, or you can do it with people from your community and people who are most relevant to the project involved.
Okay, thank you for sharing your opinions, Priya and David. Would you like to add something, Jung-woo?
Yes. Actually, I think for all the stakeholders, the sustainability is a very important issues. In particular, the AI is also important for sustainability. Is important in AI. Actually, some AI ethics or the AI talents or the AI for good, something like that, are the very strongly related to the some sustainability or sustainable growth of the society or technology, something like that, I think. So for the sustainable AI, we need very strong collaboration for the all stakeholders, including the academia, the industry, and the government. For example, in Korea, there are big issues in the ILUDA, kind of the chatbot, the intelligent chatbot system, but there are some happening similar to the MS-TEI chatbot issues. So actually, the LUDA, the chatbot name is LUDA. So LUDA was abused by some users, where in terms of the sexual abusing and some privacy issues. So I think fundamentally the technology or the company which developed the LUDA had some did not consider some privacy preserving issues and some the possibility of abusing abusing by the users. But I think we need to some educate or some teach how to live with AI. I think so. Many users have many users do not consider the how to use how to live with AI with some good mind. I think so because it is we have less opportunity to get some information or get some knowledge for the live with AI. I think so. This we need to use some the educational perspective for these issues. I think so. And the other issues is education. Actually, the many countries and most of companies suffer from the lack of AI talents. And actually, AI talents can be categorized into the AI users, AI engineers, and AI researchers for the more innovative AI, I think. So in this case, the academia can and foster some the AI talents for the AI users and AI researchers for graduate school. But in elementary school and secondary school, can teach our children, our students for the how to live AI, I think. And industry can foster the AI talents, kind of some AI engineers, I think, with their own real-world task, real-world problem, and real-world data. And government can support these academia and industry part for the for fostering AI talent, I think. Yeah. So for this sustainable AI issue, all the stakeholders should collaborate strongly, I think.
Okay, thank you for your insightful opinion, Jung. Yes, I think industry can work on it, and I would like to ask more opinion from Chesel.
Yeah, let me try. Out of your 4 subjects, to cover all those 4 subjects is too big for me. So I just want to focus about the equitable access first question. Still, when you say about AI is still very fantastic language, fantastic word. People easily think about human-like, something brilliant, digital pictures, and easily people match with wonderful, fantastic robots. But we know AI is not only that kind of objective. AI also available for many of our general citizens. If we focus about equitable access, who should be the major candidate? Definitely industry-driven or academia, some of very well-developed countries, advanced countries, they have enough abilities to develop such wonderful, advanced, high-end AI machine learning systems, no doubt at all. But we also take into account how we can reach out to general citizens, specifically those people who are living in developing regions. Possibly they might be barely get of this very old phone, mobile phone. That would be the unique device to access AI. But we have a certain ability to support, even AI should be available over there. Then we may cover half of the people in the earth. Unfortunately, still half of people is not connected yet. So that is our subject for ITU. But if we can have some activities, practical activities, how we can make AI is available to those not enough capabilities, devices, or some case use of this public place to available for those peoples, that would be one of the very important steps to make it happen of this more equitable access of this use of AI. So this is my view, and definitely this is one of the important subject of UN Special Agency, not only ITU, but overall UN. We are very focused on this subject. Thank you for that.
So I think we have heard of the opinions from industry, academia, and intergovernmental organization. Do you want to add some more, Priya or David, after you listen to the opinions from Jasop or Jung?
So I think education came up also as an important point, and I wholeheartedly agree with this, as well as equity of access. And I think that that education and equity of access should be considerate, of course, of both of these strengths of artificial intelligence, but also of, you know, the various limitations and biases that have come up earlier. I think is important to ensure that everybody has literacy, I think, in not just, you know, what can AI be used for, but also what are the ways in which this can go wrong? How, in the same way that, you know, individuals are trained in how to understand whether a particular news source is reputable and understand the failure modes there. Similarly, how to understand what the failure modes of an AI algorithm are, how to interpret that, and how to navigate a world where that might be the case. So, in general, of course, AI is a very powerful tool, but also this other side should be considered in that educational picture.
Yeah, and building on what Jungwoo and Priya said, I think that there are two kinds of education here. There's the education for the general public, people who aren't expecting ever to use AI. And literacy is really important. Understanding what AI is, people tend to think of AI as either something that's magically going to solve all the problems or going to destroy us. And the ways that people are worried about AI destroying society are typically not the ways that I'm worried about AI destroying society. They're not through decreasing trust in social systems in all kinds of subtle and prosaic ways. For example, via social media algorithms, people are more worried about killer robots. And I think understanding ways that AI is being used in detrimental ways, and also, as Priya said, failure modes of AI, ways that AI shouldn't be used because it feeds into and exacerbates the issues with AI, such as biases and the veneer of objectivity, which AI systems often have. And it seems like they are these objective, scientifically perfect things, which actually are very much perpetuating the biases of the data or of their human creators. These are the kinds of things that I think it's necessary to educate society as a whole about. And then educating AI creators themselves, because oftentimes we're giving people tools to build powerful systems, but not explaining how those systems should be used responsibly. And so engineers are building things that hurt society and then are surprised when what should be inevitable consequences, like, for example, in Tay or other chatbots manifest themselves. I mean, these are quite foreseeable if one is given the appropriate education, and sometimes they can be averted.
Yeah, actually, I really wish to echo what David said. This is education. Definitely, we have to very clear education about the AI creator, but also we have to focus about how we can raise up this awareness to the general public, how to properly utilize of this AI. We often talk about AI ethics, but actually AI is not a subject of ethics. Everything is human beings' ethics. AI is not an objective. AI is a technology. AI is one of the tools. But we ask AI have ethics. I personally believe this is a nonsense. Human beings, whether it's a creator or a user, any regulator, politicians, we have to educate ourselves. We have to keep human beings' ethics. That is a fundamental way to make AI as more operate fit to the purpose. So I really wish to concur with what David you said, and then taking this opportunity. So what Professor Lee, you asked some question about how we can do. Let me continue. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Jung already mentioned about sustainability is so important. In UN system, we are talking about many things of the digital divide, some of gaps. That was a very fundamental subject for us. But since year 2016, from the Millennium Development Goals, UN system changed the title Sustainable Development Goals. I fully agree with what John said. Sustainability is so important. We had many efforts, try this bridging the gap was we had sometimes many investment just to fill the gap. But unfortunately, the sustainability was becoming more important subject because after time flows, this gap is widened. One of our big concern is because currently AI machine learning is available only in advanced or developed, very well rich countries, rich industries. So we are really seriously concerned about this could be another reason to widen the gap. So practically last 10 years, the digital divide practically is widened rather than shortened. And we also recognize during the COVID-19 last year, this digital gap was widened. So UN report said about these SDG goals have been retreated around 5 years back. We are seriously concerned. So how we can help of this AI to make people sustainable or community sustainable. Maybe in this regard, we may focus small community rather than country or global world. Is too big dream. So we can fill the gaps from human beings, each individual or their family. We have a certain ability. Through our devices like mobile devices, any connected devices, possibly have some ability to help them and make this ability extend to their family, their community. This is one way to strengthen of this sustainability. So that's the reason why I start at the beginning is the reach out is to the general public. That is so important. So I want to start with this point. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much for your insightful opinion. I mean, I personally study about sustainability, and mostly people think about economic sustainability when we use technology. And then we talked about environmental sustainability. And now my focus is in social sustainability, actually. So which means that we can use technology for our society, for your peers, for our community, to build up our community. And I think that's also related to what you have said, the ethics. We have to understand the ethics of human as well as ethics of AI. So I think Priya earlier mentioned about the bias, right? So those bias are actually from us, right? So we learn from AI that we have those kind of bias, like Tay or other chatbot did. So I think those are the kind of things that we have to think about more, right? And regarding the previously, I was talking about the global challenges like COVID-19 and climate change. And those are actually the events that are, I would say, threatening our communities sustainability right now. So just like Chesop told us, like it's widening our like digital divide and other divides as well, I think. So I would like to ask you guys that, so more specifically, I think, what would be the AI's role to address those challenges, and what would be, for example, ITU can make standards, academia can do some research on some specific topics, and so on, right? So what would be the effort that we can make there?
I can start us off there. So Priya and I discussed many sort of concrete applications of AI, machine learning in tackling climate change, and some of the overarching themes that we see there is in distilling large amounts of data for policymakers and other decisions, forecasting problems, optimizing complicated systems to make them more efficient, accelerating the process of scientific experimentation, and speeding up some time-intensive simulations. And there are a lot of specific cases in which those are mitigating existing bottlenecks that exist in climate change strategies, both for mitigation and adaptation. And I think that the overarching themes that we see there are also relevant to many other challenges. And that's really a framework for thinking about how to see the gaps that AI is filling, because AI is not magically going to solve every problem. It can fill gaps that exist in existing strategies for solving those problems. But I also want to touch on something that we didn't dive into as much in our intro, which is that it's not simply about thinking about these separate applications of AI that are the sustainability applications and then merrily going on our way with all the other applications of AI that are just normal applications. There has been a movement to work on AI for good around the world. And while I appreciate this and think it is a good thing, it is not an excuse for us to continue with normal AI technologies being used everywhere else in society, because there are some good applications that we're doing as well. We need to think from a sustainability lens with respect to all applications of AI, like other technologies. As an example of this, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, are a technology that may very well make climate change worse if they lead to people driving more overall. And the decisions that we make in that technology will decide what the climate impacts are of self-driving cars. Now, I'm not talking about some of the other benefits for society, like increased safety, which do exist. Self-driving cars are good for safety, ultimately. But from a climate perspective, if we design them and regulate them in certain ways, it will be more or less likely that they actually contribute to a clean energy transition. We can, for example, make it easier for self-driving cars to be used in freight applications for trucks, which may reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or incentivize people to drive more by the design of the technology and by the policies surrounding it, which could lead to higher greenhouse gas emissions. We can also build in tools like platooning, where many vehicles drive in synchrony together, which is more fuel efficient. Or we can leave that until later and not actually consider sustainability in the way that we're developing this technology. The way that technologies are built matters for sustainability, even if they are not official sustainability technologies. And everything that we use technology for has a direct or indirect implication for society in lots of different ways. And understanding those is not just the responsibility of people who are thinking about sustainability, it's the responsibility of everyone, because ultimately everyone is contributing to society, whether or not we realize that we are.
Thank you so much. Chesop?
Yeah, may I join? David is quite a good point. From ITU point of view, we called green by ICT and green over ICTs. So we are very keen how ICT technology support green environment. So this is one of our goals. We did more than 10 years. Our effort, like Internet of Things, how help of this greening environment, greening project. But also we are not forget of this, as you said, David. We also ICT itself is a subject of greening. So we called Green over ICT. Very recently, we organized a new focus group called Environmental Efficiency. We want to check of this environmental efficiency. One of the key subjects is now AI. AI or cloud, people easily say cloud or autonomous driving. Those are very useful, very important from the environmental aspect, but we want to check what is their influence to the environment. Our current study is under the name of circular economy. I think as Professor Lee, you indicated economic sustainability, community sustainability, social sustainability, all this we called linked together, we call circular economy. How these new technologies influence to the circular economy. The main objective is how we can find out, we wish to identify which point is positive influence, which point is negative influence with what areas. How this is linked together. And as an ultimate goal is how we can derive all this, provide more sustainable environment, sustainable elements to those community. So I think this is a very important subject for all of us. And certainly I do believe AI has enough very important capabilities to make it happen more easily and more efficiently. I wish to add on this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Priya?
Yes, so yes, definitely agree with all of these points. And Chesab, I liked that you used the word support, because ultimately, so on a recent panel, Timnit Gebru, who's a leading AI ethics, social good researcher, said very succinctly that AI amplifies human and societal intent. And so I think that point applies very well here, in the sense that AI is not going to, in some sense, drive sustainable development for us, nor is it going to determine the values through which we do that, in the sense that if we as a society decide, right, that integrating environmental, economic, social sustainability, equity concerns is important to us in the way that we conceptualize different kinds of paths going forward, then we can employ AI as a tool to amplify that particular effort, alongside other tools, of course, from engineering and policy and so forth. But I think that in some sense, it's not that, well, how is AI going to make us more sustainable exactly? It's how are we going to choose to do sustainable things and create sustainable policy as a society, and where can AI play a support in that, potentially speed up efforts or fill data gaps or such. And I think that also in that question, then it becomes much more important, how are we picking which strategies are important to pursue? Who is at the table in bringing those ideas forward? So even the example that David gave of autonomous vehicles, another, of course, choice point is whether those are deployed in private vehicles or whether they're deployed in public transportation systems to make those more efficient. And the biases of the people who are at the table creating AI solutions are going to determine, in some sense, which of those conversations come to the fore. Even at a micro level, I am a PhD student and I make a salary accordingly. And so, for example, used car ownership is something that is, almost a normal thing to consider. Whereas even professors at my institution may not think about buying a used car. They may think about buying a new car. And that actually shapes the kinds of research questions that professors versus students tend to ask when it comes to making transportation more sustainable. And that's even within an elite institution in the United States. That small difference in perspective can lead to completely different perspectives. And so scaling that, of course, to a global level, if we have just, you know, US, Europe, Korea, like top countries sort of developing these kinds of things, that obviously limits the solution space and the idea space that we're looking at. So this is in some sense not an AI point as opposed to a broader point, but I think this broader point is important to make because again, AI is only going to amplify these various kinds of choices and intents that we create. And so it's about understanding what our pathway forward is for creating sustainable technologies, for alleviating climate change in a way that considers all these different interlinkages between these different types of sustainability and between equity, and then asking the question, how can AI help support these kinds of strategies?
Thank you so much. That was practical. Jong-woo, do you want to add something more?
Yeah. Okay. I want to add some efforts and my idea. Let's imagine for the AI for climate issues. If we make a very good and accurate models to predict some climate issues, but if the model requires very many GPU resources, that means the AI model for climate makes some lots of the CO2, I think. Then I'm not sure this is a very good solution or not, because for the solving some climate issues, we need to make some more CO2, and that kind of issues can happen in many kind of each component of sustainability, I think. So I agree with the Chesup's opinion. So we need to consider the relationship or some influences on all the components of sustainability, I think. And for sustainable society related to COVID, I want to share some example of neighbor. Actually, it is well known that the machine learning based approaches contributed to the invent some vaccine or the treatment more effectively, as I know. And this is very good. It's a very good example for the AI's AI role, I think. And in Korea, the neighbor has developed on the AI dialogue system, the call-based AI dialogue system, to prevent the COVID, to monitor the COVID-19 active monitor the subjectives. So that means actually when the active monitor the people, they should get some monitored by public officials or public health center officials, should call the active monitor patient to whether they have some symptoms on COVID-19. So do you have a fever, or do you have some symptom on your issues? But this is very hard stop for because there are too many. In our case, several tens of thousands people should be actively monitored. So this requires many efforts to cover these many people. But we developed on the call-based AI dialogue system. So the name is the Clover Care Call. So Clover Care Call can make a call to the active monitor subjectives instead of public health center officials. So it is very simple dialogue systems. Our systems can check whether they have some symptoms or they have fever. It elevates the officials' effort, so the officials can focus on their own or their fundamental tasks instead of spending time to call the active monitors subjective to a patient, I think. So AI can help these issues can help to deal with this issue. I think this is very good examples for the AI contributor to the society, I think. Actually, the sustainable community side, even in developed country or advanced country, there are a big gap in between the people in the developed country, I think. So some people, for example, the more elderly people are not familiar with using the digital devices. Or the more the poorer people cannot have the less opportunity to use or to benefit from some AI technologies. So I think the government can consider these issues and should do some effort to reduce the gap in the each government of each country, I think.
Thank you for sharing your example. I think that would be a good example for AI support that Priya mentioned. David,
step in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to respond and drill down a little bit more into something that Jungwoo brought up around climate modeling and the ways that the AI systems can contribute themselves to greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that this is a point which is particularly relevant for AI systems that are used in speech processing, natural language processing. Those are often very large AI models and they can have computing requirements themselves. In the case of modeling the climate, I think the implication actually goes the other way. The algorithms that we're currently using, which aren't AI, are actually using a lot of energy, and the role of AI is in reducing the amount of computation and the amount of energy which is necessary to run those. So approximations to complicated physical models. Currently, climate models are run on supercomputers. AI actually reduces the amount of computation required in many cases. That's sort of that's part of the function of AI. But I do think that this is a very important point to bear in mind for some particularly computation intensive tasks, which are often to do with things to do with speech or applications that aren't really climate change related. And I think that this connects to a broader point, which is it's very easy for people or companies to think in terms of impact in a way that isn't necessarily holistic. There are many companies that are technology companies that are trying to be green by making all of their energy come from sustainable sources or reduce their energy consumption. And while this is good, it's missing the point to some extent. Those are the impacts that are easy to measure. But if you're a technology company that's using your technology to aid in oil and gas exploration, as many of the leading technologies are doing, then it doesn't really matter where your energy for the computation is coming from. It's like saying you build sustainable bombs. They're still bombs. They're going to be bad for society regardless of how sustainably they're built. So thinking in terms of what one's actual impacts are requires much more than thinking about the direct energy consumption or the direct sourcing of the technology. It also requires thinking about what the technology is being used for. And AI is a magnifier, so the direct impacts of AI are going to be, the impacts of it as an application are generally going to be outsized compared with the impacts of the computation itself. So if you're using it for a good thing, that's generally going to have an outsized good impact if you're applying it to climate change. And if you're using it for a bad thing, it's generally going to have an outsized bad impact. So thinking in terms of what you're using it for, as well as the algorithm itself, is often very important here.
Actually, the reason why I described some climate prediction and some AI model is very simple. The simple some simple examples for these issues. Actually, I'm not the expert on the climate AI issues, but just what is the main purpose and what is the fundamental issues I want to share that kind of issues. So, and for in industry case, as you know, as you mentioned, we are focusing on very energy efficient AI models for the dealing with some our services or our applications, because this is we can consider the two aspects. One is the perspective of business models. That means cost reduction issues, but the other is actually the sustainability issues. For the energy consumption is very critical issues for the business models part of the cost issues, right? Because the energy itself is the cost. But the more important issue is the more energy consumption makes harm the environment or the other issues. So we want to make the more energy efficient algorithms or models. We have to try to make some more energy efficient models, and using them, we are apply them to our applications. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's a really important line of work for the big models, especially.
This discussion is going really constructive and productive right now. Regarding the use of AI in good way and bad way, right? We had some question from the floor, actually. So there was a question that says, due to notable development in AI in the recent year, it is clear that AI tools may limit the importance of human existence through using robots. It may also increase unemployment rates somehow. How can AI solve this issue? And I think this is kind of related to what Jung described in his example, because the officials actually didn't have to work and suffer from the fatigue and extra labors, right? So those are actually categorized in social sustainability, indeed. I think you all can answer to this question, I think. Priya, maybe?
Yeah, so I sort of mentioned earlier this point that, AI amplifies our existing policies and intent. And I think this is one where also it's, again, that asking AI to solve the problem of social inequity in and of itself is not realistic. In some sense, for the work issue, we have to ask the question, in some sense, how can we ensure that, for example, governmental policies are moving society in a way such that everybody's needs are provided for in a way that sort of understands or directs the development of various technologies. So it's not, for example, AI is going to displace the workforce and also figure out how to make this something that is equitable and make it so that everybody's needs are provided for. There needs to be a really strong concordance in some sense between the policy development issue and the way in which AI is developed. But I think also more fundamentally, I think this idea that AI will replace humans or must replace humans is a bit of a misnomer. In particular, I think a lot of the applications that, for example, David and I talked about in our introductory talk are applications of AI or specifically machine learning to support existing decision making or amplify existing processes with humans in the loop. So these are things like gathering data on where emissions are or where deforestation is happening or on building infrastructure. Ultimately, those they are only useful if they inform some kind of policy decision, and that policy decision will ultimately be made with humans in the loop. Or we talked about the application of accelerated experimentation using AI and machine learning to recommend which, based on previous experiments that have been done, to, for example, discover new materials, to learn patterns in the performance of the materials that were tried before in order to then guide which experiments should be tried next. That's not AI or machine learning replacing the process of human experimentation. It's informing humans as to what to do next. So I think we also have a lot of choices in terms of sort of what there are different AI paradigms basically. And I think this idea of amplifying what humans are doing or assisting humans or allowing us to do some of what we're doing in a more streamlined manner is going to be a really important class of solutions that we should really be thinking about. And for those where there are going to be workforce shifts or displacement, etc., it's really important that both AI researchers and practitioners and also governments really think strongly together about how to ensure that we have the right policies in place to make sure that, you know, again, everyone's needs are provided for, and that conversation be timely, it'd be quick, and in some sense the development of those policies and the rollout of the technologies is coordinated between both the tech companies, for example, and the policymakers who are creating these kinds of policies.
Thank you.
Let me jump in.
Yeah.
Let me jump in on this. And that is a very fundamental question. It's quite old, very long years of these questions. From ITU point of view, when we started this AI for Good Global Summit, we discussed about how we ITU engage with this AI space from year 2015. There are many concerns are raised. Most of the questions are generally addressed to the concerns. Mostly how we can remove dark side. So my bureau, we take a decision, dark side is impossible to remove. We may look at the bright side because it's a tool. If we are enough, we manage this tool for good. So that's the reason we set the name, title, AI for Good Global Summit. I showed this some concept of this Priya, but we have to think about two aspects of this, how this. Definitely we need a policy, all politicians, all stakeholders get together to share our concerns. If we can reach very good consensus, that should be very powerful. So I believe this UN system should continue, even under the UN Secretary General. Tech group is already addressed on such a subject. But as you know, while we are continuing our dialogue from this top level, that's not easy to get consensus, take a time, so long time, but while we are continuing such a dialogue, the people suffered or people might be damaged, influenced, let me say. So we leave off this part, but we also focus on this to the general people. Let me make an example is now everybody, almost of this half of the population utilize mobile phones. Even many of the population utilize smartphone. We didn't have any consensus. When you start of this smartphone, just coming, and people utilize. So now we see, we witnessed bright side and the dark side. Social network is many concerns also raised, but we know how powerful of these social networks. We know that, no doubt at all. So even we see some of dark side, but we also see many bright side. So issue is how we can encourage of these people to more practically contact even small portion of AI. Can you imagine, we generally in my office, I have 2 assistants because I'm a director, so 2 assistants. I don't know how many assistants you have in your office, but definitely according to the position or according to the roles, functions, we often utilize assistant because assistant, their help is so useful, so valuable. But each of our human beings will have personal assistant in their mobile phone or in their any device. How we can improve the productivity, how we can improve individual efficiency will give our people have more time. So issue is, for me, top-down definitely important, but we also think about bottom-up. Bottom-up means each individual should be ready to use, properly use, and adopt and become good expert to use of AI. If not the case, following of this question, AI help to people to keep their position? I don't believe so. Mobile phone, internet, how this mobile phone and internet changed the world, how many legacy job was disappeared? Huge. We already changed. So we are just to continue. So issue we have to all general citizens, how we can ensure all general citizens get close or get used without any difficulties or limitations to contact to use of this AI. That is one of the issues, I believe.
And I agree with that. And I just wanted to jump in to clarify something I said as well, which I totally agree. These top-down conversations are very important, as are the bottom-up. I think my intent was not to sort of say we must reach a top-down consensus before we can do anything bottom-up. What I was trying to speak to, I think, is the idea that I think there's this unhealthy notion often among technological providers that or Silicon Valley, for example, that the development of AI in the way that these entities want it is inevitable, and everybody else in some sense has to catch up. And I think that's not a healthy way to think about the development of these technologies. I think we do have a lot of choice points about how to make these technologies more sustainable, more equitable, and what their ultimate, we will not be able to forecast all of their ultimate effects on society, but we of course should be thinking about these things as we're rolling out technologies. So I think it's very important for solutions providers to not think of themselves, for example, as above society. We're going to roll out AI and everybody is going to catch up, but indeed a part of society, and really thinking about how some of these things will affect our social and sustainability fabric as we go forward.
So actually, I totally agree with Jessup's opinion. So we are changing due to the caused by the AI technology or the new technology. So new technology should some reduce or diminishing some jobs, right? In all the new technology did that. The internet or the mobile phone or the emergence of a car, something like that, I think. But for this region, the government should support or deal with these issues, I think. So some people lost their job due to the new technology. Then government should support these people who lost their job to adopt a new environment or new task with their education or something like that. So industry or academia can help them to adopt a new environment by giving some education or course or curriculum and some the financial support by the government, etc. I think. Yeah. So AI is a very powerful tool for the enhancing productivity. So many people can enhance their productivity using AI. So the government should focusing on some the people who lost their job or their opportunity due to the AI, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your opinions, guys. It's already an hour past, but if David has something to add, please.
Just very briefly then. I guess I concur with what everybody said here. I just want to add one piece, which is that just remembering that AI is not one thing. So it's lots of different things and lots of different settings. Most of them are really small. They are not powerful. They do one specific thing very well, and they are like a tiny piece of a larger apparatus, a larger computation being done in a computer, a larger system. Also, people tend to think of AI as like robots, and there are robots, but many robots don't use AI, and most of the AI out there is not in robots, it's in computers doing all these invisible things. And then also, AI is one of these things that inspires very strong feelings, and people really want to put it in boxes. AI is extremely powerful. AI is total rubbish. It's not going to do anything. Neither of those is true. Is AI just good? Is AI bad? Neither of those is true as well. AI is what we use it for. As many people have said here, it really accentuates our own goals and desires and biases as a society. And trying to simplify things is a cop-out, and it's a way that engaging with the system in a more nuanced way is avoided. People can get out of engaging with something if they say, oh, well, this is always good. That's not true. You can very easily get into the trap of just adding AI to things and thinking that you're benefiting society. Is AI bad? You can very easily get into the trap of eliminating lots of good applications of AI in the name of protecting from society from something that can be dangerous, which it can be. And the fact that the AI systems are constantly changing is also a challenge for society, and in particular for policymakers, both what the AI systems are and what they're used for. Both of these are moving targets. So, I mean, I guess I would just end this with a call for nuance, remembering that everything is complicated and multifaceted, and AI itself is complicated and multifaceted. And that's one of the reasons why it's ultimately up to us exactly how it impacts society.
Thank you. It's true that it's all depending on us. Are we ready to accept AI?
I really enjoyed this today. Just following what David, more than 35 years ago, when I submitted my master grade paper, was robotics using AI. So I was engaged with this 35 years ago, but unfortunately at that time, there was not enough job for me. So I have to join with this network community. So that is an irony. Now it's coming back. AI robots is becoming very popular subject. This forum, the theme of this forum is how we can ensure this extent of this engagement and empowerment. That's very important subject. We certainly believe any tools, any technology have the good side and the bad side, but in this regard, AI has really very good potentials. Let me say for the moment, the potential to help people's extent of their empowerment and engagement and empowerment. So empowerment, engagement, by the language, let me say, we have to build trust. Security, privacy, all this is very important. So our concerns, hope, dreams, objectives, also very important. But most fundamental thing is if we just focus on the empowerment, engagement and the empowerment, how we can build trust among those stakeholders. I believe in this regard, definitely in my organization at the UN Special Agency, we have our own works and also academia, industry. Your engagement is very, very important. So I want to, as a conclusion remark, we will work together. I'm very happy to meet with you guys, your community. So we work together on this. and to build trust for the future, bright future. That's my final concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. How about Chang? Do your final remark?
Yeah, whenever I give a talk in any presentation chance, my last comment is see further over the shoulder of giant. Actually, giant is AI. So we need to try to our best to import the AI for the engagement environment by maximizing bright side and minimizing to minimize some the dark side for the AI, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now let's hear from David or Priya. Okay.
Sure, I'm happy to go. So yeah, thank you for the great panel. I guess to close, I'll just echo something that I think is reflected in what a lot of the panelists have said, which is that what will be of kind of chief importance going forward is, of course, for us to, of course, as a society, decide that we are going to create sustainable change going forward, bolstered by policies, by standards, and so forth. And that we are going to consider strongly considerations such as equity of access, education, in doing that. And then once we have sort of decided that this is the direction, that these are the considerations, that this sustainable change be bolstered by all of the tools in our toolkit, including artificial intelligence. I mean, I, of course, by virtue of being one of the leaders of climate change AI, think about the climate change issue very strongly. And of course, we have to move quickly on a lot of these issues, net zero emissions by 2050, in order to avert some of the worst consequences. And so concerted societal action will be kind of a prerequisite to ensuring that AI is a useful tool. It won't be the other way around. And as a result, it's really important that we have sort of a strong engagement, as Brenda brought up, between academia, industry, civil society, which I think has actually not come up very much today, but civil society, international organizations, to make sure that all of these different opinions and ideas are at the table as we move forward. And so also echoing Chesub's call to action about engagement with ITU, similarly, for those who would like to dive more deeply into issues specifically relevant to climate change and AI and machine learning, I would definitely encourage you to get in touch with our organization and to engage in some of our activities that David outlined during the opening.
Thank you very much. Our last remark from David.
Well, I would second what everybody said, and really can summarize a lot of what I think is important here just by saying listen and learn. And that goes for everyone in this space. That goes for me and other folks in AI and computer science, understanding what the problems and bottlenecks are, where AI and machine learning and computer science can be relevant, and making sure that we're building tools that are driven by what society needs and shaped by what society needs from the outset, and really building those considerations into everything we do, and listening and learning from policymakers, from the people who will be deploying technologies, the end users and communities who are affected, and then recommendations for many other people is also thinking about what one wants out of a tool like AI, where it fits in, learning enough that it's not a big mysterious magic thing. AI is not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve any of our problems. by itself, and it can only do what we ask of it, and only do what we want if we really understand what its strengths and limitations are. So building that knowledge into society, and working together in all settings where this is relevant, and not thinking of sustainability as something that we work on in parallel to society. It's something that we work on in every aspect of our work, whether that is from a climate change perspective or in other settings as well. Yeah, that's what I have.
Thank you to all our distinguished panelists for their enriching presentations and great panel. As my concluding remarks, I would like to emphasize something that many of our speakers have mentioned here today, and that is that technology, including AI, does not appear or progress on its own, but it is up to us to steer it in a way that benefits everyone in society, while also placing special importance on the most vulnerable and often excluded segments of the population. Moving forward, let's not be discouraged by the huge task ahead, but be encouraged to use the cutting-edge technology that is AI to engage and empower one another to achieve sustainable development and a better future for all. Thank you very much.